District of Idaho. Before we formally begin today, on behalf of my office, we remember Michael J. Fika. Mike, age 49, passed away unexpectedly on Sunday. He was a long-time career federal prosecutor in our Pocatello office. He prosecuted more than 500 cases and 1,000 defendants over 19 plus years. He handled a broad range of cases, but focused on illegal drugs and organized crime. He worked closely with federal agencies and the Idaho State Police. In 2012, the ISP formally recognized Mike for his exceptional prosecutorial work. He was respected by the judiciary, his colleagues, law enforcement, and the defense bar. We will miss Mike. Joining me today are similarly dedicated prosecutors, law enforcement, and correctional leaders. Joshua Hurwitz, an assistant U.S. attorney, Eric Barnhart, special agent in charge, and Doug Hart, senior resident agent with the FBI, Director Henry Atencio, Deputy Director Jeff Samuda with the Idaho Department of Correction, and Scott Bandy, Criminal Division Chief with Jan Bennett's office, Ada County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. After my remarks, additional remarks will be provided by Eric Barnhart and also Henry Atencio. Today I announce the indictments of 7 individuals in 2 federal criminal cases alleging criminal activity, including certain correctional officers employed by the Idaho Department of Correction. The indictments were handed down earlier this week and unsealed this morning. All of the defendants were arrested early this morning by the FBI. It is currently anticipated that initial court appearances will be tomorrow afternoon. These indictments resulted from an investigation conducted by the FBI at the Idaho Department of Correction's request. I want it clear. The Department of Correction's leadership asked the FBI to conduct the investigation, and the department leadership was aware of the investigation as it was taking place. In particular, Director Henry Atencio and the department's assistance during the investigation was essential. In the first of the 2 cases, 4 Idaho Department of Correction officers are charged. Timothy Landon, 35, of Boise, is charged with 2 counts of conspiracy to aid and abet the distribution of controlled substances and 1 count of possession and transportation of contraband cigarettes. Richard McCullough, 36, of Boise, is charged with 1 count of conspiracy to aid and abet the distribution of controlled substances, 1 count of distribution of cocaine, and 2 counts of possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime. Eric Thompson, 38, of Star, is charged with 1 count of conspiracy to aid and abet the distribution of controlled substances, 1 count of distribution of cocaine, 2 counts of possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime. Robert Wallen, 35, of Boise, is charged with 1 count of conspiracy to aid and abet the distribution of controlled substances and 1 count of possession and transportation of contraband cigarettes. I believe that each of you were provided a copy of the indictment so that you can read the allegations. Your copy may have the word sealed on it, but it has been unsealed. The indictment alleges that these four individuals agreed with each other to provide assistance and support to a drug trafficking organization. For their services, these defendants received cash payments from undercover FBI agents. The services provided by McCullough, Thompson, and Landon included acting as security at what they believed to be drug deliveries and payment drop-offs, weighing drugs, counting money, preparing drugs for delivery, transporting a load of drugs for the drug trafficking organization, and for McCullough and Thompson, delivering drugs to the drug trafficking organization's customers. As to Landon, it is alleged that he provided security at drug deliveries and payment drop-offs and weighing drugs and counting money. McCullough, Thompson, and Landon used their positions as correction officers to further their conspiracy and contribute to the drug trafficking organization. These charges carry significant penalties. Conspiracy to aid and abet distribution of controlled substances and distribution of cocaine each are punishable by a mandatory minimum of 10 years in prison, up to life, and a $10 million fine. Possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime is punishable by a mandatory minimum of 5 years in prison, in addition to the sentence for the underlying drug trafficking crime. A conviction for a second offense of possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime carries an additional mandatory minimum prison sentence of 25 years, in addition to the mandatory minimum 5-year prison sentence for the first conviction for this offense. In the second indictment, one former correction officer, a former inmate, and another person are charged. Former correction officer Joshua Barney, 43, of Boise, is charged with one count of conspiracy to commit Hobbs Act extortion under the color of official right, one count of conspiracy to use a facility in interstate commerce to further unlawful activity, and 2 counts of use of a facility of interstate commerce to further unlawful activity. Former inmate Colin McIntyre, 27, of Stanfield, Oregon, is charged with the same counts as Mr. Barney. Tiffany Culbertson, 23, of Meridian, is charged with the same counts as Mr. Barney and McIntyre. You've also been provided a copy of this indictment so that you can read the exact allegation. In summary, however, the indictment alleges that these 3 defendants agreed with each other to smuggle chewing tobacco and a cell phone into the IDOC prison facility. McIntyre and Culbertson communicated. Culbertson provided money and contraband to Barney. In exchange, Barney brought contraband into IDOC and gave it to McIntyre. These charges carry the following punishments. Hobbs Act violations are punishable by up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. Conspiracy to use and use of a facility of interstate commerce in furtherance of unlawful activity is punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. The prosecution of these 2 matters will be led by AUSA's Joshua Hurwitz and Melissa Liu from our Boise office. I want to thank the FBI, the Boise Police Department, the Meridian Police Department for the diligent, methodical, and thoughtful work of their agents and investigators, especially the leadership of Doug Hart and his team. In addition, I'm thankful to Jan Bennett and the Ada County Prosecuting Attorney's Office for their assistance in working with our office. Again, our office and the FBI are particularly grateful for the diligent partnership of the Idaho Department of Correction and Director Henry Atencio's assistance. It is important to remember that an indictment is a means of charging a person with a criminal activity. The defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. We'll next hear from Eric and then Henry, and then after that we'll be prepared to answer a few questions. Eric?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to echo the U.S. Attorney's noting of the loss earlier this week of Assistant United States Attorney Mike Fika. Mike Fika was a great friend to the FBI and to the cause of justice, and we will miss him. The investigation about which we're speaking today is about a violation of trust. These 4 current IDOC employees and 1 former employee used their official positions to further their criminal conspiracy, and for that they will be held to account. Holding public officials to account for their wrongdoing is among the highest priorities of the FBI, and we will pursue these matters to all lengths. I too want to thank IDOC Director Atencio and his leadership team. Director Atencio, when he recognized he may have a problem, he came to us immediately, proactively. That's what we would expect for any agency. The fact that we may have wrongdoing in one of our public agencies, unfortunately, is not uncommon. The way he handled it, though, was exactly the way that we would want any leader to handle it. Recognize you have a problem, meet it head on, engage us, we conduct a thorough investigation, and we as agencies all get better going forward. I believe Idahoans should be very proud of the way that Director Atencio, his staff, law enforcement that participated in this matter conducted themselves. I also want to thank the U.S. Attorney, his office, the Boise Police Department, the Meridian Police Department, and the Ada County prosecutors. The FBI does nothing alone, and this investigation was no different. Without these partnerships, we would not have had the successful outcome that we saw here with the arrest today. Thank you.
Henry?
Gary. Good afternoon. My name is Henry Atencio. I'm the director of the Idaho Department of Correction. I'd like to thank the United States Attorney Bart Davis, the FBI Resident Supervisor Doug Hart, and all the dedicated law enforcement professionals in the Bureau and the U.S. Attorney's Office who worked so hard on this case. This investigation began 2 years ago when our own Idaho Department of Correction investigators uncovered evidence of what appeared to be a pattern of serious wrongdoing. As we began our investigation, we realized we needed help. We needed an outside agency to conduct a thorough investigation. In March of 2016, we met with Special Agent Hart and his team here in Boise. We shared the information that we had at that time, and we pledged our full cooperation. Since then, the FBI agents assigned to this case, our Department of Correction investigators, have been tireless. We are inspired by their commitment to the pursuit of justice and are so grateful for their efforts. Most of all, I want to thank the men and women of the Idaho Department of Correction. The vast majority of them are dedicated, ethical public servants who walk the toughest beat in every corner of the state, every day and around the clock. They are Idaho's unsung heroes, and it is because of so many of them, their strength, their integrity, their willingness to stand up and do the right thing, that we are able to be here today for the announcement of these indictments. Thank you.
I'll take a few questions, please.
Sir?
Yes.
A couple of quick questions. Thank you very much. So in the first case that we're talking about, the 4 correctional officers charged, my understanding is that this drug trafficking organization was actually FBI undercover agents that were operating with the, or they were working with got involved with FBI undercover agents. The bottom line of my question was, were any drugs actually smuggled in by these four, any contraband drugs smuggled into the prison, or was it all on the periphery as this investigation?
Thanks. Please.
Yes, obviously, looking at the sensitivities of this and not wanting to introduce contraband in ourselves, great care was taken that the criminal acts committed by these individuals were done outside the facility.
So in all cases, as I understand it from reading the indictment, an FBI undercover agent made contact with a nurse, I believe, in the prison, who, through that, they got the other individuals recruited, so to speak, and there were false drugs, real drugs. Just explain kind of what happened.
All right, I'm going to turn that.
Okay, go ahead. Just briefly, though.
Sure. We utilized a number of approved and authorized investigative techniques. Some of those involved actual drugs, and some involved drugs that were not real drugs. In all instances, the drugs were at all times in the care, custody, and control of the FBI. No drugs were distributed at any point or introduced into the community.
Your name, sir?
I'm Doug Hart.
Yes, right, FBI, you're the first one.
Scott, one of the first things that that happened that involved our office was to address the very ethical questions that you have raised, and in those visits, it's my understanding that our office provided counsel as to what they could and could not do. So, yes.
I have a couple of questions that I think maybe Director Atencio might be able to answer.
Well,
did the criminal activity involved in these two indictments all center around one specific prison? Also, you said that correctional officials first noticed what appeared to be suspicious activity 2 years ago. Was that related to a specific gang or SPG? And has, since presumably the FBI was not involved at that point, have any of the people involved in those activities or suspected activities been arrested?
Okay, yes, Henry, please.
Thank you. So a couple questions there. When we became aware of our concerns, we went immediately to the FBI, and I believe they were thorough in their interviews and throughout their investigation. I believe it was primarily focused to one institution where these folks worked, our Idaho State Correctional Institution. We brought forward our concerns, and I think the FBI did a fantastic job in their investigation and working through all of those details.
The nurse, did she work for Corizon, and is she still employed as a health professional or in any other manner at an Idaho IDOC facility?
The nurse was a Corizon employee. She no longer is employed by Corizon.
And she doesn't appear to be charged as any part of these indictments. Was that through a deal to turn state's evidence or feds evidence in?
We're not in a position to go further than that, but what other questions do you have?
Director Atencio, now I know your predecessor had mentioned in past legislative sessions to JFAC in particular that he talked about problems with people smuggling cell phones and things like that into prison facilities. And one of the things he said is at play is that it's a pretty big temptation for staffers who are making lower wages than they would in pretty much any other law enforcement agency or even in neighboring states. The legislature took some steps to raise wages a bit, or to give the IDOC more flexibility rather in wages. Do you think that that has had any impact on curbing the temptation of contraband businesses?
Well, we're here today to talk about the indictments, not compensation or related issues, but that was a good try.
Just to be clear, these indictments involve two separate cases that have no overlap, no connectivity, correct?
They are two separate cases.
Did you uncover the alleged criminal activity in one case in the process of investigating the other case?
You know,
They just commented.
yeah, we're really not in a position to unfold all of that here today, but thanks.
Do you see this, Director, as the tip of the iceberg? Do you think there's more that might come out, more correctional officers that might be influenced to violate this public trust?
Well, I want to go back and point out that this investigation has been ongoing for a couple years. I believe the FBI was very thorough in their approach, and in that process, we found 4 current staff members. That represents a very, very minute percentage of the 2,000 employees who work for the Department of Correction. So I think the answer is no. I don't believe that's a systemic issue. I think we were very thorough in that approach.
Do you still have issues?
Let me just echo the director said. It was a 2-year exhaustive investigation, and it takes that length of time and using the investigative techniques that we did to make sure that we identified the problem and hold those people to account. But to your question, these sorts of investigations are twofold. Holding to account the people that have violated the law and sending the message to others who are thinking about it that that is not a road that they want to go down. But we're very comfortable, again, with the incredible cooperation of IDOC and the director, that we were able to conduct this investigation. We're very comfortable with our findings.
All right, with that, we've got one more question.
I know you said the investigation has been ongoing for 2 years, but any timeline of how long the operation had been going on before that from inside?
Well, Henry, do you know the answer to that?
I don't have the specific answer for that.
Thank you, though, for it. Appreciate all of you coming, and if you didn't get a copy of the packet, let us know, and we'll make sure you have a copy. Thanks. We're adjourned, a term I'm familiar with.
So how's the new job treating you? We did.